today with Sue Ann Kern, a parent of a Park City high school student who was involved in the infamous high school party bust this past November 23rd. Sue Ann, can you tell us a little bit about this party and what you witnessed that night?
Fred, on November 23rd, like you said, there was a party in Trailside to celebrate the graduation of one of the winter sports schools' seniors. And my daughter was invited. The Park City High School senior class was invited. Many from the junior class was invited, and then Park City winter school students. So the police were not invited. However, they learned of the party when a local convenience store caught two kids trying to steal some beer. So they followed the kids to the party and looked in the window, saw all sorts of beer bottles and cans and things like that on the tables, lots of cars out on the street, and proceeded to bust the party. So I got a call about 1:30 in the morning from Jessica telling me that she was at this party and the police were there. And damn it! So I got out of bed, got dressed, drove over to the party, 1:30 in the morning, and there were dozens of parents there already, dozens of police officers. It was mayhem. Everything was just topsy-turvy. But we didn't really know what was going on. So I saw there were kids climbing on the roof. There were kids jumping out windows. There were policemen arresting kids, driving off, taking the kids to the police office. Didn't really know what was going on. There was really no communication with the police. So there were, like I said, dozens of parents there, and we were out in the cold, in the dark, trying to figure out what was going on. And I was in conversation with Jessica, because she had her cell phone, and I learned that inside the house there were kids drinking, there were kids doing drugs and smoking pot. And she said it was just mayhem in the house. Kids were so afraid. They were crying. They were trying to throw up. They were trying to eat whatever they could. and she didn't know what was going on. So the parents of the house would not let the police in. So the police had to go get a search warrant. So we're out in the cold waiting to find out what's going on. And like I said, the police were arresting kids. They were waiting for the search warrant. And because this party was so huge, there were Park City Police, Wasatch County Sheriff's Department, Summit County Sheriff's Department, and the Highway Patrol, because there were so many kids, over 70 kids in this party. So we kept waiting to find out what was going on. And finally the search warrant came and the police were able to go in, but there was still no communication with the parents. We didn't know what was happening inside. We didn't know what was going to happen next. So it was really, really frustrating. And some of the parents got very belligerent with the police, since there was no lack of communication. So it was very scary and frustrating. And luckily, since Jesse and I were having conversations, I had a feeling for what was going on. And she was not drunk, but she did admit to having some drinks earlier in the evening. But it was just a very frustrating night because we were just out in the cold with no information and afraid for our kids.
Wow. Sounds like quite the harrowing evening. I'm sure the following week was quite interesting. Right? I'm sure the news next week started to unfold. What was the reaction from the parents with whom you spoke?
The next week and weeks after, the rumor mill just ran rampant. So I spoke with a lot of parents and a lot of Jessica's friends, and they were very afraid, obviously, because they didn't know what was going to happen. When Jessica was released about 4:30 in the morning, the policeman opened the front door, said, "Jessica Kern, are your parents here?" And I was standing right there. Shoved her out the door, shut the door. We had no idea what was going to happen next. We didn't know if she was going to get a ticket, a citation. We didn't know. What I did find out was that the kids at the party were all treated a little bit differently, probably because there were so many kids there and so many different police officers. But some kids were breathalyzed. Some kids just had to do an eye tracking test. Some kids had to try to walk the straight line. Some kids were just immediately released to their parents. Some kids were let go because the police just took their word and when they said they weren't drinking. What I did learn was that the 18-year-olds who did test positive were all arrested, and that was very scary. I also learned that in Jessica's case, she was given a breathalyzer, nothing registered. They gave it to her again, nothing registered. They gave it to her again, nothing registered. They gave it to her 6 times, nothing registered, and finally, on the 7th time, she registered a .002. One of the police officers came up to the officer that was testing Jessica and said, "Oh, well, if she can't make it work, she must be drunk." So that's what the experience was with my daughter. But all the kids were not treated the same way, which I thought was very unfair. What was frustrating for me, though, was that in the beginning of this week, the kids were afraid. They didn't know what was going to happen. The parents were upset because because of their kids' actions and staying at the party and drinking and not being smart enough to leave when they saw the party was getting out of control. But I learned as the week progressed, the attitude changed from the kids being afraid and the parents being mad at their kids and realizing they needed to be disciplined, to all of a sudden, it's not the kids' fault because kids will be kids and kids are going to drink. It's the policeman's fault. It's the sheriff's fault because they shouldn't have busted that party. Come on, they were in the house. They had parent supervision. They shouldn't have busted them. They shouldn't have arrested these 18-year-olds because now they have a police record. So it went from being a learning lesson to being a lesson where the kids were saying, "Hey, the cops were bullying me. They shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't get a ticket. I shouldn't have a record." I was appalled because it went from this learning experience to be an attitude of fluency, if you're familiar with that. The kids had the attitude that, well, my parent is so-and-so, and they're a leader in the community, so I shouldn't have anything happen. So that was extremely frustrating.
What do you think can be done to prevent this same type of fiasco in the future?
There are a few things I think that can be done. I felt the communication between the different law enforcement agencies was very lacking. It was very difficult to figure out who was in charge, what steps they were taking. I understand it was a big party. I understand they needed to have a lot of law enforcement agents there. But no one seemed to know what was going on. No one was communicating with the parents when we were outside saying, "This is what's happening. Your kids are being breathalyzed. As soon as they're breathalyzed, we'll release them to you." None of that. We were just out in the cold waiting for the door to open to see if our kid was going to come out. The other thing that was frustrating to me was this whole attitude of affluency with the kids. And teaching the kids that because of who their parents were, or because kids will be kids, they should be able to get off with a warning. And I have a really hard time with that because a lot of these kids, this is not the first time they drank, I'm sure. It's probably not the first time they were smoking pot, but this is the time they got caught. And if you teach a kid that, okay, you did it, but we're going to let you off, what does that teach them the next time? What does that do to the authority of the police department and the sheriff's department the next time there's a party? Well, you let these 70 kids go without a warning. Why aren't you letting my kids go? The parents need to be held responsible. There were adults in that house that were allowing these kids in there to drink and to do drugs. To me, that's criminal. It's illegal. They allowed my kid in there and took the responsibility allowing my kid to drink. Didn't ask me about it. What gives them the right to do that? They need to be held accountable. We pound the drinking and driving things into our kids from the time they're in kindergarten with red ribbon weeks in school and everything they learn in their health classes and in their driving lessons. They have this amazing day at the high school called the docudrama where they do a mock accident, which is very powerful and shows kids what happens if there is a drinking accident. One of their fellow students is killed, another is arrested and goes to prison. So we pound this in, but they don't get the message because then they see other kids just getting off. I know some of the 18-year-olds did get off. They got their charges dropped. Jessica had to go to the juvenile court. She didn't have to go see a judge, but we had to see a counselor. It was really scary, but it was a great experience for her because she learned this is what happens. And if you do it again, this is what's going to happen to you. She had to pay a fine, and I felt it was a really good learning experience. But I think we need to teach these kids that just because your parents are somebody special, or just because kids will be kids, you should not be able to get off with something like this. There will be a community forum next Wednesday at the Jim Santee at 7 o'clock. So I invite everybody to come to talk about this issue and what we can do in the future. The sheriffs from Wasatch and Summit County and the police department will be there also. So I hope everybody.
Thank you, Sue Ann, for coming to our show and sharing your story and your thoughts. And I hope everybody does go to that forum. And great story. And we hope Jessica has a bright future without the drugs and the drinking. Thank you.